Sometimes you move into a neighborhood thinking it's the start of something good, a fresh chapter, a peaceful life. But every so often, life throws you a neighbor you didn't ask for, and definitely didn't deserve. I'm David Carter, and what started as a simple summer dream of backyard barbecues and quiet evenings turned into a battle for basic respect, one entitled Neighbor One, Backyard Pool, and one ridiculous claim later. I found myself standing up not just for my property, but for my sanity. What happened next wasn't just about a fence line or some water in a pool. It became a fight for fairness, for boundaries, and for a community that needed to remember what decency looked like. This is my story. If you asked David Carter why he moved to Flagstaff, Arizona, he'd tell you it was for peace. After a decade of high-pressure tech jobs in Phoenix, all he wanted was a quiet life. Sunsets, pine trees, a hammock in the backyard, and the luxury of an in-ground pool to cool off during the brutal desert summers. He worked overtime, saved every penny, and finally bought a modest but charming single-story home tucked away in a sleepy cul-de-sac. His greatest pride, that brand-new pool complete with soft blue lighting and a polished stone deck. Every late evening swim felt like a small victory, a reminder that sometimes hard work paid off. For the first few months, life was everything he hoped for. His neighbors were pleasant but kept to themselves, exactly how David liked it. There were the Myers across the street, retired school teachers who waved every morning, and the Rodriguez family next door, who occasionally dropped off homemade tamales during the holidays. Life moved at a slow, predictable rhythm. Then, Monica Reed moved in. It happened without much warning. One day, the old for sale sign disappeared from the Johnsons' front lawn, and the next, Monica was there, mid-40s, sharp-featured, and carrying an air of entitled frustration with every box. She hauled up the driveway. David, ever the polite neighbor, introduced himself on her move-in day. She barely made eye contact. "Busy," she said, shooing him away without a second glance. At first, he brushed it off. Some people just needed time to settle in. But it didn't take long before Monica made herself impossible to ignore. It started small complaints about David's lawn clippings blowing into her yard, passive-aggressive notes about his trash bins being unsightly if they weren't wheeled back within 20 minutes of pickup. Then she started glaring whenever he floated lazily in his pool. Like his personal enjoyment was some grave insult to the community, David made every effort to stay civil. After all, it wasn't worth starting a neighborhood feud, not over petty annoyances. Then summer hit hard. By June, Flagstaff boiled under a relentless sun, and the temptation of David's glistening backyard oasis became too much for Monica to resist. One afternoon, as David relaxed by the pool after a long day, he heard Monica's voice slicing through the hot, heavy air. "Hey, you!" David lifted his sunglasses and turned toward the fence. Monica stood there, arms crossed, her teenage son and younger daughter hovering behind her like nervous shadows. "You gonna share that pool or what?" she snapped. David blinked, stunned by the brazenness. Sorry, but it's private property," he said, trying to keep the conversation light. "The city pool's just a mile down the road." Monica's face twisted into a scowl. "Private property? Seriously, in this heat, my kids need somewhere safe to swim." David sat up. "I'm sorry, Monica. Liability issues, and it's my personal pool." "You think you're better than the rest of us," she barked. Before David could even reply, she spun on her heel, dragging her kids back inside. He watched them disappear behind the slamming door, a heavy knot forming in his stomach. Something told him this wasn't over, and he was right. From that day forward, the war over David's pool, and over something much deeper than a backyard amenity, had officially begun. Over the next week, David noticed Monica's behavior shift from passive-aggressive to outright hostile. At first, it was just the glares, then more subtle things: trash mysteriously dumped near his gate, a scratch down the side of his mailbox that hadn't been there before. Nothing he could prove, but enough to make his stomach tighten every time he pulled into the driveway. David kept his cool. He wasn't about to escalate things over petty nonsense. He figured Monica would eventually realize he wasn't going to give in and move on. He was wrong. It was a scorching Saturday afternoon. When it happened, David had just stepped out of the shower towel slung around his neck when he caught movement on his backyard security monitor. His stomach dropped. There, clear as day on the screen, was Monica and her 2 kids. Not standing at the fence this time, but inside his backyard, in his pool. David stared speechless as Monica lounged casually, on a floaty sunglasses on as if she owned the place. Her son cannonballed into the deep end, while her daughter splashed near the shallow side. They looked like they had been there for a while. Fury boiled inside David as he threw on clothes and stormed outside. "What the hell are you doing in my pool?" he shouted. Voice cracking from pure disbelief, Monica pushed up her sunglasses lazily. "Cooling off," she said. "It's a community right." David's hands balled into fists. "There is no community right. This is my private property. You're trespassing." Monica scoffed, splashing a bit of water his way. "Oh, calm down. It's just water. You can't gatekeep nature." David couldn't believe what he was hearing. "Out now," he said through gritted teeth. "Or I'm calling the police." The kids exchanged nervous looks and began climbing out of the pool. Monica, however, didn't move. "You wouldn't dare," she sneered. David pulled out his phone. "Try me." Finally, she huffed and climbed out, dripping water across the stone deck like she owned it. She grabbed her kids roughly by the arms and stalked toward the gate, only to find it locked from the outside. David crossed his arms. "You broke in through my side fence, didn't you?" Monica said. Nothing but her furious expression confirmed it. David opened the gate for them, but as they passed, Monica leaned in close, her voice a venomous whisper. "This isn't over, Carter. You'll regret this." He watched them disappear down the street, heart pounding in his ears. This had officially crossed the line from neighborly dispute to something much darker. Later that evening, David uploaded the footage from his security cameras to a cloud drive, just in case. He even emailed a copy to himself and a trusted lawyer friend. If Monica was willing to trespass in broad daylight, who knew what she'd try next? And sure enough, things got worse. 2 days later, David received a notice, taped to his door. Violation improper, use of shared resources. There was no HOA in his neighborhood. He double-checked. He even called city zoning to confirm his pool, his yard, his rules. The notice was a fake. A desperate attempt by Monica to intimidate him. That night, David sat by his darkened pool staring into the still water, thinking about everything that had happened. The ridiculousness of it. The anger simmering just beneath his calm exterior. And he realized something. He couldn't just wait for her next move. He needed to strike first. Smart, legal, and final. David wasn't just going to defend his pool anymore. He was going to defend his home, his peace, and make sure Monica's reign of entitlement finally ended. The next morning, David woke up with a plan. No more waiting. No more reacting. If Monica wanted a battle, she was about to get one. But on his terms, he started by filing a formal police report for trespassing and property damage. The security footage spoke louder than any words could. Crystal clear, time-stamped, and undeniable. The officer at the station, a no-nonsense woman named Sergeant Reeves, watched the footage twice before leaning back in her chair. "You've been more patient than most," she said, jotting notes. "We'll take it from here." David left the station with a copy of the report and a surprising lightness in his chest. It felt good to finally push back the right way, but that wasn't all he had planned. He gathered every fake notice Monica had left, every text, every passive-aggressive note. He compiled it all, dates times photos, into a neat digital file. Then he met with his lawyer friend Marcus, who wasted no time in drafting a cease and desist letter, citing harassment, trespassing, and defamation. Monica wasn't just facing police trouble anymore. She was staring down a civil lawsuit. That afternoon, David was sitting on his patio, sipping coffee, when a patrol car pulled up across the street. He watched calmly as Sergeant Reeves and another officer walked up Monica's driveway. From his seat, he could hear the raised voices, First, Monica's screech of indignation. Then the officer's clipped firm response. "You're under investigation for criminal trespassing." David didn't need to see inside to know the meltdown happening behind those walls. Sure enough, moments later, Monica burst out the front door, shouting about injustice, about neighborhood rights, about how she was the victim here. No one believed her. Neighbors, who had previously kept their heads down, now peeked through blinds and cracked doors, whispering, exchanging looks. Some even stepped outside, arms folded, watching the scene unfold. When Monica realized the tide had turned against her, she changed tactics, fake tears spilling down her cheeks. "I was just trying to give my kids a summer. They'll remember," she sobbed. "He's ruining it. He's ruining everything." Sergeant Reeves didn't flinch. "Ma'am," she said coldly, "you made a choice. Now you live with the consequences." By the time Monica signed the citation and slumped back into her house, the damage was done. Her reputation was shattered, her support non-existent. And David. David finally felt something he hadn't in months: peace. But there was one last surprise. Later that week, David received a knock at his door. It wasn't the police. It wasn't Monica. It was her kids, standing awkwardly, hands stuffed in pockets, eyes downcast. "Mr. Carter," the teenage boy said, voice cracking slightly. "We just wanted to say we're sorry for everything." David blinked, taken off guard. The girl nodded quickly, looking like she might cry. "It wasn't right," she whispered. "We knew it, even when Mom kept saying it was." For a long moment, David just stood there, feeling the weight of it all, the anger, the frustration, and the realization that the kids were just as trapped as he had been, victims of their mother's entitlement. He smiled gently. "Thank you," he said. "That means more than you know." They left after that, heads a little higher, and David. He knew he had won far more than just a fight over a pool. He had reclaimed his home, his peace of mind, and, maybe most important of all, a little hope for a better future for the next generation. Because sometimes the real victory isn't about beating the entitled. It's about outlasting them, outsmarting them, and showing everyone watching that decency still wins,